Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're venturing into the fascinating and often misunderstood territory of sexual sorcery.
Indeed. And our main guide for this journey is Jason Miller's book, Sex, Sorcery, and Spirit, The Secrets of Erotic Magic.
Right. This book presents a pretty bold idea, doesn't it? That sex acts can be used intentionally, like to alter consciousness and even the external world.
Exactly. It goes beyond just, sacred sexuality or maybe improving performance. It's framed as a manual, really.
A manual for harnessing this powerful primal energy for deliberate change.
Yeah, and Miller does this interesting blend of Eastern traditions, mostly Himalayan Tantra, it seems, and Western esoteric paths.
So our mission in this deep dive, we want to kind of unpack the core concepts, the practices he talks about.
And address some of the, let's say, potential objections or sticking points that naturally come up.
Exactly. We want to highlight the key takeaways so you can get a quick grasp of this really intriguing subject, without getting totally overwhelmed.
We'll touch on some history, the potential dangers, which are important key techniques, and the philosophy underneath it all.
Okay, sounds like a plan. Let's dive in. Miller starts by setting the stage with two foundational stories, one Eastern, one Western. Let's start East with the Guhyasamaja Tantra.
Okay, this origin story is quite something. It involves a king, King Indrahoti, in what's now Afghanistan.
Right, and he sees the Buddha and these 500 arhats
Yeah, these enlightened monks.
flying off to the Himalayas every night to meditate, then coming back to India to teach the usual stuff, renunciation, monastic life, celibacy.
The standard path, basically. So the king, he's impressed, but maybe not quite ready to give everything up himself.
Makes sense. So he invites the Buddha to teach in his kingdom.
But instead of the expected teachings, the Buddha does this dramatic transformation.
Yeah, into this being called Guhyasamaja, multiple arms, multiple heads, in sexual union with a partner who's just as complex.
All within this mandala of other beings doing the same thing. And the 500 arhats, these super pure monks, they apparently fainted from shock.
You can almost picture it. It's quite the visual.
Definitely. And after this big reveal, the Buddha teaches the king this method of secret conduct.
Using passions, the very things usually seen as poisons or obstacles, as the fuel for enlightenment.
Right. It completely flips the script. Instead of rejecting desire, you harness it. Turn the poison into medicine, essentially.
Like turning your biggest weakness into your greatest strength.
This story really underlines that concept of inner versus outer teachings. The outer ones are safe for everyone.
But the inner ones, like this Tantra, are maybe hidden, riskier, meant for specific people ready for that path.
And they suggest that these powerful passions, like sex, aren't just obstacles. They can actually be accelerators on the path. A huge contrast to just renouncing everything.
And the story continues, right? The king and his wife practice this.
And supposedly reach enlightenment within their lifetime, which was considered, incredibly rare via the standard sutric path.
And then they teach it to everyone in the kingdom.
Leading to the whole kingdom becoming enlightened and basically vanishing. Kind of a funny consequence.
Depopulated by enlightenment. So before they all ascended, the king writes down the Tantra.
Hides it in a stupa, which gets surrounded by a sea full of Naga serpent people.
Who also achieve enlightenment using the text.
Then, 1,000 years later, the Mahasiddha Nagarjuna finds the sea, gets permission from the Nagas, retrieves the text, and brings it back to India.
It's quite a lineage, and Miller makes that playful point about modern Kalachakra initiations.
Yeah, thousands receiving these initiations from the Dalai Lama, doing guru yoga, maybe totally unaware of the bedroom practice roots deep within it.
So the big takeaway from this Eastern thread seems to be about hidden potential, maybe in places we don't expect, and that spiritual paths can be more complex than they first appear.
Definitely. Now, shifting over to the West.
Miller traces Aleister Crowley's thelema back through some really obscure texts.
Yeah, this is fascinating. Crowley's system, do what thou wilt, focusing on will and desire.
He got the name thelema from Rabelais, right? From Gargantua and Pantagruel.
He did. Rabelais wrote about an abbey of thelema. But Miller suggests Rabelais himself probably got the term from an even earlier, much weirder book from 1499 called The Hypnerotomachia Polyphily.
Polyphilo's Strife of Love in a Dream. Wow, what a title. And it's this mix of Italian, Greek, Latin, super complex.
Attributed to a Dominican monk, maybe? Francesco Colonna? There's debate. But the connection to sexual magic comes from the story itself.
Okay, so what's the story?
It's an allegory. Polyphilo is dreaming, searching for his love, Polia. He's guided by two figures, logic reason.
And thalassemia will, desire.
Exactly. They come to 3 portals made of brass. The first is Gloria Dei, the glory of God.
Path looks tough, right? Stony, thorny.
Yeah, Logistica says go for it, but Selene says, nah, not for you, not yet. So not the path of passion, clearly.
Okay, portal number 2.
Gloria Mundi, glory of the world. Guarded by this strong matron figure with a sword. Represents worldly struggle, achievement through trial.
Logistica approves of this one, too. The path of manly struggle.
She does. But again, Thelemia's like, hold on, check out door number 3 first.
And this is where it gets interesting for sexual magic, right? The third portal, Mater Amoris.
Precisely. Mater Amoris, mother of love, or Erdetophofis, nurturer of love.
Yeah.
Here, Polyphilo meets this joyful young woman.
And the path behind her is different.
Totally different. A lush garden. Beauty, food, drink, nymphs, pure sensual delight.
But Logistica, the voice of reason, she must have objections.
Oh, yeah. She warns him against this feigned and cosmetic beauty. Predicts heartbreak, pain, death, all the usual warnings against indulging the senses.
What's Selenia?
Just weighs dismissively.
Yeah.
Basically tells him to ignore Logistica.
So the takeaway here seems to be the validation of desire as a spiritual path, but maybe with a handle with care label.
Absolutely. Passion is powerful, a valid route, but you have to navigate it carefully. It has inherent risks, just like Logistica warned.
And Polyphilo, being Polyphilo, follows thalassemia and the allure of love.
Of course. He enters the garden, finds Polia, gets rebuffed, initially symbolically dies, even then gets revived by her kiss, thanks to Venus.
And they dedicate themselves to love. He wakes up, end of dream.
Right. So both these stories, East and West, point to a path that might be quicker than asceticism, but definitely riskier.
Logistica's warnings mirror the Buddha's caution about the tantric path being like scaling a cliff. Faster, but a bigger fall if you slip.
Which brings us neatly to the objections and dangers Miller discusses. Because, let's face it, sexual spirituality raises questions for people.
For sure. It's not exactly mainstream religious practice for most. Miller acknowledges these concerns up front.
And he points out that even within the traditions themselves, like the Buddhist Tantras comparing it to that cliff face, there's an awareness of danger.
It's a fair question, though. If sex is common, how dangerous can this specialized form be?
Miller tackles that. He mentions common worries, like needing years of intense training first.
Or people questioning mixing spiritual stuff with sorcery? That sounds like an odd combo to some.
And, of course, straightforward moral objections based on traditional views of sex.
How does Miller respond to the danger aspects specifically?
He argues that a lot of the warnings from, say, a century ago were really rooted in Victorian anxieties about sex.
So in today's more open world, maybe those specific fears are less relevant.
Perhaps, but he's very clear. Real dangers do exist, and the book addresses them. He doesn't just brush it off.
What kind of real dangers?
Well, one big one is the misuse of sex in cults for mind control. He'd use examples like the Branch Davidians, or even some issues within groups like the OTO.
Ah, so the power that makes sex magic potent can also be twisted for manipulation.
Exactly. It highlights the responsibility involved. There's also the risk of unscrupulous individuals twisting the teachings for selfish gain, exploiting others.
A risk wherever power dynamics and intimacy mix, really.
True. But Miller also focuses on the internal dangers for the practitioner. He actually pushes back against needing tons of prior spiritual training.
Oh. So what is the main internal danger, then?
He suggests it's the amplification of your own qualities, the good and the bad. When you start channeling more energy through these practices.
It ramps everything up.
Pretty much. When Eastern texts talk about ego clinging, it means your unhealthy patterns, your ego issues, they can get magnified too. It's about maintaining balance when dealing with powerful forces.
Okay, that makes sense. So dealing with these dangers, maintaining balance, it sounds like purification is key. Miller calls it a core principle.
Absolutely. He uses that great analogy of the agitated lake.
Right. Our minds are like murky water, stirred up by daily life thoughts, emotions, stress.
All that energetic turbulence. And it stops us from seeing the clarity, the purity that's naturally underneath.
So purification is about stilling the waters, letting the mud settle so you can see clearly.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
And he outlines different ways to do it. Outer, inner, and secret methods.
Let's start with the outer method. Sounds straightforward.
It is. It's renunciation. Just completely avoiding the poisonous plant of distracting passions, the monastic path.
Effective, maybe, but probably not for everyone reading a book on sexual sorcery.
Miller admits as much. Then there's the inner method.
Which is more about working with the passions.
Exactly. Utilizing them, but purifying them. Breathwork is a key example here, which we'll get into more later. It's about refining and transmuting energy, not just shutting it down.
Okay, and finally, the secret method. This sounds intriguing. Invoking higher powers.
Yeah, this involves calling on divine energies to basically flush you out with their purity.
Hmm.
Miller details a 5-step visualization based on tantric Buddhist practices, specifically Vajrasattva sadhanas.
How does that work?
It starts with breath purification, seated meditation. Then you visualize a star overhead. From that emerges this pure white god and goddess in union.
Okay.
Above them, an infinite field of enlightened beings. Below you, a pit filled with demons and suffering beings. It's a whole cosmic setup.
Like setting the stage for a major energetic cleanse.
Precisely. Next, you mentally confess your failings, not in a guilt-ridden way, but acknowledging where you've missed the mark according to your own ideals to this divine couple.
They act as intermediaries.
Right. They transmit your confession upwards, and blessings and purifying light shine down on them in response.
And that triggers the actual purification.
Yes. The couple engages in sexual union, and their combined fluids become this divine elixir, or nectar,
Which flows down into you.
through your central channel, filling every cell, every subtle pathway, purifying thoughts, emotions, everything. As this nectar fills you up, you visualize all the negativity, like black, inky gunk, flowing out of your body, through your eyes, nose, mouth, ears, groin, pores, purifying all the senses and desires.
Where does all that gunk go?
It flows down into that demon-filled pit below. But Muller stresses this isn't punishment, it's a gift. Your waste becomes sustenance for beings in a grosser state.
Like cosmic recycling.
Kind of. The practice ends with gratitude and a vow to maintain that clarity. It's a powerful way to prepare for more intense work by actively engaging higher energies for cleansing.
Okay, purification covered. Now let's get into the nuts and bolts of the energy body, the subtle body anatomy Miller focuses on. He keeps it practical, right?
Yeah, he acknowledges there are super complex maps out there, but he zeroes in on what's most relevant for the techniques in the book.
He focuses on the etheric body, like the layer closest to the physical.
Exactly. He says that's where most sex magic happens. It's the densest non-physical body, kind of the energetic blueprint, and has its own anatomy.
So what are the key parts of this etheric anatomy for sexual sorcery?
First up, the central channel. He calls it the pillar, known as Avatuti or Shubna in Sanskrit, runs top of the head to the perineum. It's the main energy highway.
Got it. Then the belt channel.
Also runs crown to perineum, but spirals around the outside of all the other channels. Its job is defense, but also crucially, it's involved in merging energies between partners during sex magic, where the two become one energetically.
He mentions front and rear channels too, but says they're more for advanced Taoist stuff. So central and belt are the main focus here. What about power centers, not the standard 7 chakras?
He approaches it a bit differently. Instead of a fixed list, he discusses centers based on their importance for sex magic, and he stresses strengthening the channels first is key.
Makes sense. Build the pipes before turning up the pressure. What's the first center he highlights? The core center.
Right, his term for the lower dantian, or hera, located below the navel, near the spine. It's the body's center of gravity, the main reservoir of our innate sexual energy, the kundalini seat.
Okay.
And the root center.
Got the perineum.
That corresponds to the Muladhara chakra. Super important for drawing earth energy up, grounding, and crucially controlling energy release during sex.
He briefly mentions other points too. Genitals, navel on the front channel, points on the back, even the feet centers, the bubbling springs for earth energy. It's like a practical energy map.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Finally, he talks about the drops, or bindus.
These sound fundamental, like the raw ingredients.
Sort of. In tantric systems, they're seen as the red and white seeds from our parents. Red drop from the mother vitality, associated with vaginal fluid located near the navel or root.
And the white drop.
From the father wisdom, associated with seminal fluid located in the crown. These drops are key players in practices like creating the elixir later on.
Okay, subtle body basics down. Now, a really crucial part. Breathing techniques. Miller says they're vital for power and control.
Absolutely critical. He starts with vase breath as the foundation.
How does that work?
It's a deep, full inhale, filling the lower belly like a vase. Expand the abdomen. Hold the breath, then exhale slowly. Simple, but powerful.
Once you have vase breath, he introduces the locks, the bandhas. What are these for?
Locks are muscular contractions. They stop energy leaking out, love intensity, and help cultivate the inner fire that's the power source for a lot of this stuff.
3 main locks, right? Root, upper, middle.
Yep. Root lock, mula bandha. Contracting the pelvic floor, anus muscles. To draws energy up. Same muscles you use to Stop peeing midstream.
Got it. Upper law.
Jalandhara Bandha. Chin slightly down towards the chest, gently closing the throat.
And middle lock.
Uddiyana Bandha. Drawing the abdomen up and in, especially after exhaling.
And he combines vase breath and locks in a specific sequence.
Yeah, a 6-step process. Basically, vase breath in, apply root and upper locks, maybe a little sniff more air, then slow exhale while drawing the lower abdomen in. After the exhale, engage all 3 locks fully.
Why engage them after the exhale?
Allows the energy movement to continue even without the breath pushing it. It builds internal pressure and heat. Repeat the cycle.
Okay. He mentions other breaths too. Bellows breath for quick energy.
Exactly. Yeah. Rapid, forceful exhales after a full inhale, like 30 breaths in 10 seconds. Focus is drawing breath down on inhale, pushing it up the spine on exhale. Really fires things up quickly.
What about reverse breath and embryonic breath?
Reverse breath helps distribute energy evenly after intense practice, prevents feeling wired or sick. Embryonic breath isn't really a technique you do. It's a super shallow breath that can happen naturally in deep meditation, or, interestingly, after sex.
And basic breath meditation. Just watch the breath.
Pretty much. Gentle awareness, relax, let thoughts come and go without grabbing onto them. Crucially, he says, abandon lust of result. Don't expect anything specific, just practice. Distractions are normal, just return to the breath.
Okay, now for a fascinating section. Flying solo. The magic of celibacy and masturbation. He starts with celibacy, contrasting Gandhi and Sivananda.
Right. Gandhi had a pretty negative view of sex overall, whereas Sivananda was more balanced. Miller's point is that choosing celibacy should be for its own benefits, not out of, hating sex.
Then what are their supposed benefits?
They're pretty varied. Psychological stuff like feeling self-worth not tied to being desirable, emotional freedom. Physically, some report increased strength, better memory.
And magically, more energy.
That's the main one. The idea is that retaining sexual fluids retains vital energy. Some practices aim to alchemically transform that conserved sexual energy into spiritual power.
Ohas.
Which leads to the flip side. Sorcery with masturbation. Specifically, sigil magic.
Yeah, this is a staple in modern chaos magic and beyond. Create a symbol, a sigil for your goal.
And charge it at the moment of orgasm.
Exactly. Usually through masturbation for focused intent. The intense energy release of orgasm powers the sigil.
How do you make this sigil?
Miller mentions a few ways. Use existing ones, use magical squares like Kamiya's or the Rose Cross method or Austin Osman Spare's famous technique. Write out your desire, cross out repeating letters, and combine what's left to a unique symbol.
Okay, create the sigil, then the orgasm. He mentions this can be done with a partner too, but focuses on solo work here, and he brings up fluid retention again. Crucial point. Especially for men, consciously preventing semen release during orgasm, using the root lock primarily.
He also mentions a physical technique, the 3-finger method.
Yeah, applying pressure at the perineum to assist the lock. But the lock itself is the main internal technique.
And for women?
Same principle. Using the lower lock and will during orgasm to retain vital essences, directing the energy upwards instead of letting it dissipate outwards. The benefits are similar. Prolonged bliss, stronger energetic reverberation, increased generative force for magic.
Okay, from solo work to interacting with other beings, working with gods and spirits through sex. First, invoking god forms.
This is about consciously embodying a deity, taking on their characteristics during sex. Miller talks about needing divine pride, not arrogance, but a healthy sense of embodying the divine.
Interesting point about LGBTQ plus deities, too. It's not just heterosexual pairings.
Not at all. He gives examples from mythology, Horus and Set, Odin and Loki showing same-sex divine interactions. Opens up the practice beyond traditional pairings.
But he warns against just mashing any two deities together, right? The coffee analogy.
Oh, yeah. Just because two gods deal with, say, love, doesn't mean they'll work well together in a rite. Do your research, check compatibility, pay attention to results. Don't just wing it completely.
He also finds hints of sexual practice in Western texts. Song of Songs, Gospel of Philip's Bridal Chamber.
Yeah, suggesting these ideas aren't totally alien to Western mysticism, even if often interpreted purely symbolically.
So how does the actual invocation work during sex, the 4 steps?
Step 1, emptying. Get mentally still. Quiet the inner noise.
Step 2.
Reemergence as the deity. Use imagination, well, maybe even props or costumes, to build the feeling and form of the god or goddess within yourself.
Step 3.
Opening to presence. Clear your mind again and invite the deity's actual consciousness or essence to inhabit the form you've created. Not necessarily full possession, but a tangible presence.
And step 4 is the sex itself.
Right. Sexual union as the rite. The act becomes the magical operation. Orgasm is seen as a primordial gate you pass through together while holding the divine forms. Passionate engagement is key.
Which flows right into strategic orgasm and partner energy work, approaching orgasm with intention.
Exactly. Especially when invoking deities, aiming for simultaneous orgasm is often the goal, creating a unified peak experience.
And he gives tips for achieving that. Pacing, locks for men.
Partner stimulation, communication, maybe manual help for women. Practice with the locks and vase repest beforehand helps a lot.
And shifting focus from just personal pleasure.
To worshiping the partner's divine form, seeing the god or goddess in them. This deepens the connection and the magic, flowing into them energetically.
He also suggests astral exploration as foreplay, sensing energy connections.
Yeah, feeling the subtle bodies interact, sensing energy gates, maybe even mentally visiting each other's chakras, sharing impressions, deepens intimacy and gets the energy flowing before the main event.
And the inner fire with a partner practice, how does that differ?
Often done seated, face-to-face. Less about vigorous thrusting, more subtle internal movements and energy exchange. You consciously draw in your partner's sexual essence while doing the locks, balancing the red-white drops internally.
And transmitting the fire.
Synchronize breath, kiss deeply, and consciously will the built-up inner fire energy into your partner's mouth and down through their system. Then switch directions. A longer practice, maybe 30-40 minutes, aimed at sublimating the energy for spiritual growth, not just orgasm.
Moving on, divination through sex magic. Using that orgasmic state for insight.
Exactly. That moment of ego dissolution at orgasm is seen as a potential window for clarity, for receiving visionary answers to questions posed just before or during.
Quality of orgasm matters here, he says.
Yes, mastering the techniques like locks and breathwork helps create a more potent, focused peak for divination.
Interesting point about semen release versus retention for men doing divination.
Yeah, he suggests release might actually be better for receiving visions, potentially. Though inner fire with retention can also produce visuals. First release after chastity is considered particularly potent.
And for women, similar principles with locks and will to direct energy.
Generally, yes. Directing the energy consciously, whether retaining or releasing fluids, is key. Intuitive abilities can be heightened.
Now for the really esoteric stuff, the elixir of life, the sorcery of sexual fluids.
This gets into deep alchemy. He puts it in the context of outer alchemy, ancient practices seeing sexual fluids, the prima materia, as having huge magical power.
He talks about the white drops, semen, mentioning Paracelsus.
And the red drops, female fluids and menses, noting their reverence in Tantra, especially Shakta Tantra, where menses, Kunda Pushpa, is highly valued.
And the elixir itself is the union of red and white.
Symbolically, yes. Red King and White Queen, Amrita and Rakta, the contents of the Holy Grail in some interpretations.
What are the claimed effects? Immortality.
Claims range from restoring youth to accelerating spiritual progress. Miller cautions against taking literal physical immortality too seriously, but emphasizes its value as a catalyst for spiritual practice or empowering talismans.
How do you actually create this elixir? It's not just about having sex.
Prolonged sex helps, but the key is incorporating the inner fire practice during union. Passionate play, exploring, flowing, using what he calls volcanic vase breathing, cinching the locks, varying angles and depth. It's an intense focus practice.
He mentions Vajroli Mudra, again withdrawing the mixed fluids with the penis.
Yeah, discusses the historical context, modern demos, his own experience. Also notes the ethical issues and potential for misuse, like controlling a partner.
Contrasted with oral consumption, which is mentioned in tantras and Western groups like the OTO.
Right. Sometimes other substances were added too. Then there are post-elixir practices like prayer, focusing energy at the crown, timing with the full moon for menses.
Okay, briefly now, artificial spirits and homunculi. Starting with artificial spirits, egregores, servitors.
Common in chaos magic and other traditions. Intentionally created non-physical entities for specific tasks. Miller mentions the Fraternitas Saturnis psychoganes created using sexual fluids.
Basic creation involves purpose, sigils, and charging, often with the elixir.
That's the gist. He also touches on the idea of giving them an expiration date, referencing Alexander David Neal's famous Tulpas story as a cautionary tale, though maybe not definitive proof.
And homunculi, Miller seems really hesitant here.
Understandably. It's the alchemical idea of creating a little man. Not just an artificial spirit, but something more physically anchored.
How does sex magic fit in?
One method involves natural conception, but instead of a human soul, intentionally drawing in an elemental or other non-human spirit to ensoul the fetus. Crowley and Persons apparently experimented with this. Extremely controversial and ethically dubious, as Miller strongly implies.
Yikes. Okay, shifting gears again. Sex with spirits. Spectrophilia.
Attraction to and relations with non-corporeal beings, ghosts, demons, elementals, etc. Miller notes cultural examples like the Palpabawa or incubus succubus, while cautioning against misinterpreting sleep paralysis or psychological issues.
He discusses incubi and succubi demons of top and bottom.
Can be predatory, but also potentially consensual encounters. There's even mention of a 4-part elixir using human and demonic fluids. Methods involve conjuration or seeking them in trance, dreams.
Then learning to love your elf, relations with nature spirits, fairies.
Again, can be unwanted encounters or consensual relationships, like some Icelandic beliefs suggest. He includes a ritual for inviting them, potentially as lovers or teachers, but stresses the dangers and need for banishing skills.
Sex with gods is mostly unknown territory beyond prayer, he says, but then inappropriately touched by an angel.
References Genesis 6, but focuses more on Ida Craddock's experiences with her angel husband's self. She even developed a 3-degree system of sexual practice with him.
And connecting this to the holy guardian angel concept.
Yeah, suggesting the HGA could potentially be a partner for exchanging knowledge, maybe even carnal contact, but emphasizes it's two-way, requires caution, not just wish fulfillment.
Almost there. Let's touch on BDSM and its connection to sexual sorcery.
BDSM bondage discipline, dominant submission, sadism masochism, relevant to magic historically, initiations involving ordeal, and psychologically, pain, sensory deprivation, altering consciousness.
Safety and consent are paramount, he stresses.
Absolutely essential. He notes binding can aid focus. Whipping can induce altered states or charge sigils. Again, safety first. Extreme examples like ritual hanging are mentioned as ordeals for gnosis, but with huge risks.
How does BDSM intersect with deity invocation?
The dom sub-roles can map onto deity embodiment. The submissive might offer their experience as a sacrifice, while the dominant embodies the receiving deity. Release from bondage can symbolize spiritual freedom, requires immense trust.
He also links this to sacrifice and magic generally, offerings, giving things up, enduring discomfort.
Right. Deities draw subtle essence from offerings. Binding can even be a sacrifice to feed spirits, citing a potentially dangerous rite. Extreme goetic examples are mentioned with reservations.
Finally, the appendix has 4 sample rites, just a quick glimpse.
Sure. Rite of Harmonia, Ares and Aphrodite, involves invocation, inner fire, union. Bounty of Zeus and Demeter is for wealth, involves seal charging. Evocation of an angel is for knowledge, with the seeker being receptive.
And general advice for adapting or creating rites.
Respect traditions, be cautious, research, use divination. Don't just throw things together randomly.
Wow. Okay, that was definitely a deep dive into Miller's sex, sorcery, and spirit. So to quickly summarize some key takeaways, sexual sorcery is, well, complex, deep roots in East and West.
It's fundamentally about using the intense energy of sex for spiritual goals and magical effects.
Right.
Requires knowing your subtle anatomy, breath work, purification.
And really intentional engagement with your consciousness and potentially with deities or spirits. It's not casual.
Not at all.
Yeah.
And thinking about that intimate link between our physical, energetic selves and how taboo sex often is in spiritual circles. It makes you wonder, right?
Wonder what?
What other potentials might be hidden in experiences we just take for granted, maybe dismiss? Could understanding our own passions actually unlock new paths to knowledge, to transformation?
That's a really provocative thought to end on. Something for you, the listener, to consider. If this deep dive has sparked your interest, maybe check out the source material, research the traditions we touched on.
And definitely contemplate the ethical side of these powerful practices. It's a journey of ongoing exploration, always more to learn.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.